Okay, so for today's class, we'll be looking at dependencies and security in Fast API. So another interesting concept that we cannot actually avoid, right? Because when building APIs, we likely need some dependencies and security. Okay, because most of the time we don't want our entire endpoint to be open to public. So as such, there is need for to put security in place. And we're gonna see how we can achieve that in today's class with Fast API. Background is terrible. Okay, so as usual, we will just move from slide to our VS Code, and so that we don't switch between screens. That way, we just have everything done there, right? So both the notes and the code themselves, we just put it within our source code. Please hold on. My background is noisy. Please let me see if I can minimize that noise. Please hold on. Right. So I think that's better. Okay. So let's move straight to our VS Code, and let's just put down everything there. Okay. So we are already familiar that our source code is available in the KodeCamp 5.0 endpoint. So this is where we have our entire source code. Okay, so we have our virtual environment there, and our source code there in the main folder. So we are already familiar with this process. So first of all, we have to activate our environment, right? Our virtual environment, which in this case is our library box. So library box /script /activate. Right, and then we'll just go ahead and just cd into main, because that's where we have our entire source code. Okay, and we can open this up in VS Code. Okay, so our VS Code is taking time. Okay, so while that is actually loading, let's talk about like a brief explanation of what the dependency is. Right. Okay, so we have it up right now. Okay, so basically, let me just create a new file, and then as I'm talking, I'll just type it down in the new file. So here I will call this other file. Hold on, my VS Code is kind of lagging. Some reasons. Hold on. Right, I'll call this file dependency or depend and security and sec, right, and sec .py. All right. So what exactly is dependency? You would ask. Okay, so basically dependency is basically functions or classes in which our route function is is relying on, right? So I don't want to bring in the word depend on again, right? So that's basically what dependency is. It's basically functions, or most times it could be classes, right? That our route that our route function is relying on, right? Is relying on. So that's basically what dependency is. So basically, the functions or classes that what the route functions is relying on. So basically, what actually happens is that when a request comes to a particular route, right? By default, we know that that our route function should execute a particular instructions, right? Or should process that particular request, and then they will send out response. When we bring in dependency, basically what would then happen when the request now comes in? So instead of of that request going straight to your route function, okay? So it goes straight to these external functions or external classes. So these functions fires up first before then doing or passing that request to or passing the process or the result of that execution to your route function, and then you can somehow, if there's need to, you can do what somehow use that request use that response within your route function and process other things before doing what before sending out the final response. That's basically what dependency is, and it's a very crucial concept. It's a very crucial concept in situations where let's assume that every request that you intend to collect. Let's say you want to make sure that every request comes with a particular parameter, right, or a particular variable or a particular value. So what you could do is before that request hit your route function, you want to first of all do what process that request somewhere else, which in this case in your dependency function or class, and somehow, right, do whatever you see fit with it, and then at the end of it all, you do what you send out the final the response down to your route function, and from there you can proceed. You can proceed to doing any other thing, and then finally sending out the final output. So that's basically how dependency works. And like I said, FastAPI is a very simple framework, right? So all these theories that we're telling us, this big grammar and English, the implementation is very simple, right? It's very simple, right? It's very simple. So let's just dive straight into seeing how dependencies can be implemented in FastAPI. Okay, so I will comment this out, right? I will leave it there for reference sake, right? For reference sake, and we know what needs to be done. That we need to do what we need to import our FastAPI. Remember, each of these files it will be considered as a single project, right? As a new project. But don't worry, in our next class, we will see how we can handle multiple files in one project, because the truth is that as we build, right, our source code tend to expand, and when they expand, you cannot actually put everything in one file. So in our next class, we look at how we can do that with multiple files and how we can link them up and let FastAPI see it as one big project or as one single project. Okay, but for now, we will still treat each file as a single project. So we have to go with we have to go and bring our FastAPI. So I'm just going to copy and paste. All right, because I want to assume that we already know why we are doing the things that we are doing, right? Except there's someone that doesn't know why we are doing. Then of course you can always ask us why we are doing what we are doing, and then I would definitely and gladly go back and re-explain. Okay. All right, so we import our FastAPI, and then we make the instance of FastAPI. Okay, and then finally we can start creating route. So I will create a very simple route, a very simple route. Let's say the route of let's say this one. Looking for a very simple route. Let's look at this particular route, right? Let's look at this particular route. So I'll copy this man and I'll just go and edit it. So I'll call this route the the route of two numbers, right? That takes in for now that takes no parameter, right? So but then here would be get. Let's use get because I intend to use my browser for this particular class. Right, and then at the end of it all, we just return something, right? They just return something. So we are already familiar that whatever we are returning here, FastAPI will be automatically sending out as a JSON standard, right? So we don't even have to worry much about how that happens. Okay, so if I should just come here and just send out our normal dictionary, which will in somehow be sent out as a JSON structure for the external parties to do what to actually do what work with this kind of information. Okay, so here I will return a message. Let us assume let us give a message, right? And then we'll just give success. Nothing really much, right? Nothing really much. Okay, so that's basically all. Let's go ahead and let's fire up this man and let's see how it goes. Okay, so let's turn on our server, and I also want to believe that we are also familiar with how this is done, right? So I want to believe that we are familiar with how this is done. So okay, so let's okay, what are we doing? Let's So UVCon, okay, UVCon, and then the file name, which in this case what is dependency and sec, right? Colon app, right? So I will not add the dash dash reload, okay, because it says that well, okay, so that it should be depends. Sorry, not dependency, please. That should be depends. So depends and sec. Okay, let's see. So it says import depends must be all right. So yeah, that is true. That is true. So the thing here is that there is a library in FastAPI called depends. So when we create this file and name it as depends, it assumes that what we are trying to overwrite that library. So we have to just come back here and just rename this file, right? I'll just call this dep and sec. Okay. Okay, so let's rename this to dep and sec. All right. Okay, so let's go back and let's rerun our server. You edit this to be dep and sec. Oh, it still say the same thing. Probably it's because of that name. Let's just come here and let's rename this man again. So let's take out that ampersand and let's put underscore there. All right, so I think that's done. Let's go back again. Let's try this out. Underscore. All right, so we are up and running. Okay, so let's go back again and let's make a request and let's see if our request goes as expected. Okay, so let's come back here and let's paste this man here, and here we have the URL is what is add of two numbers, right? Add dash two dash numbers, right? Right, and we send this GET request, right? So that particular URL takes in a GET request, and then at the end of it all, we have this result, right? So so this is the result. So our request went through and it was successful. All right, so now let's go back again and let's see how dependency really works in this case. So like I said, dependency is basically what functions or classes that execute be, that execute before your route function. So that's basically their job. Their job is to execute before your route function. So before that request gets to where we have this execution here, something, right, a function or a class somewhere should do what should execute first. Okay. And then since it is being considered as a dependency, it means that automatically we are expecting a result from it, right? Automatically we are expecting a result from it. So that means when invoking that function, we have to do what we have to somehow assign that function to a variable, because we are seeing that function as a dependency, and because we are seeing it as a dependency, it means that we are somehow expecting what a result from that function, right? So that's the whole point. Okay, so let's go back and let's create a function. So I am for this particular class, I'll just deal with functions as dependencies. Okay, so here I would create a function, and this function I could just call this function dep1, right? You could call it anything, right? So I'll call this dep1 and I'll invoke, and for now this function takes nothing, but then at the end of it all, this function would simply just return something, because that's the whole point of it being what a dependency. So this function would somehow return, let's say we return hello from dep1. Okay, and then now that we have this function established, right? Now the next thing is what is to make this function to be seen as a dependency, right? So that's the next thing. The next thing is to make this function to be seen as a dependency. Excuse me. Right. So the next thing is to make this function is to make these functions be seen as a dependency. So how does that really work in FastAPI? So because the thing is that if we just assign this, if we just invoke this function inside our route function here, it violates the whole point of what of dependency, because the request will do what will definitely arrive at the route function to invoke that function that we assumed to be what to be a dependency. So to to not actually violate this, right? The past API said about that we can use a special library called depend, right? Now depends is a special function that takes in our dependencies functions, right? And do what and will invoke that function before allowing that request to do what to get to your route function. So how does this really work? So basically, what you want to do is you want to come here to your route function, right? And then I could just give this a variable called D1 as dependency one, right? But then if we leave D1 as it is, right, FastAPI will automatically see it as what as a query parameter. So what do we do? What do we do in this case? In this case, what we can do is either we can assign this man to a variable, all right, to a value. But then if you assign it to a value called the depth, right, and call depth one, right? Then the whole point of dependency is still being violated, because a request would definitely arrive at your route function. So to not make that happen like that, right? What you need to do is to come here and do one and use the depends function, which will do what, which will in turn take in your dependency function, which in this case what is dep one. All right. So the thing here is that you don't need to invoke your dependency function. Like, you don't need to come here and invoke this function, right? So that's the job of the depends, right? The depends will invoke that function. So you don't even have to. You don't even have to you don't even have to actually invoke it here. So the depends will do what will invoke that automatically. And for a visual sake, I'll just come here and just print hello. All right, from dep one again. All right, so I'll print hello from dep one here as well, and then return it as a value as well. All right, so let's go back and let's send this request one more time. So if we go back again and we send this request one more time, okay, and you do this. Well, you see that that the request actually went through, but then if I come to my terminal, I see hello from dep one. Now, what happens is that this function, this hello from dep one is coming from here, right, from that print statement. So it means that that function was fired, right, before even arriving at this particular route. If you even look at the terminal, what you see is that what you see here is that this hello from depth one, right, arrived before what? Before we even process that get request, right? So normally, if this was to be seen as a normal function, the hello from depth one should have come after that request has arrived at where at your route function. Okay. Okay. So that's basically what dependence or how dependencies work in FastAPI. Is that simple? And the good thing is that when you have a function like this set up, right, to be considered as a dependency, right, that function can also be seen as a route function. So what do I mean? It means that this function can also take in all the parameters that we have so far, right? The query parameter, the path, and the rest of them, right? But then if you don't make it to go, if you don't pass this function to the depends function from FastAPI, right, then it will see that function as your normal Python function that have parameters, right? That's just the difference. Okay, that's one of the major that is one of the major difference. So if I come here now, right, and pass this man, let's say I pass a comma b, right? Now by default in a normal Python sense, right, that should be like that function they call the one is taking two parameters, right, a and b. So it means that when you want to invoke that function, you should do what? You should provide the value of a and b, abi. But then the good thing is that once you pass this function like this to the depends built-in function from FastAPI, it sees it as what as as our query parameter. So it means that if I should now try to make a request again, then this man should tell me that I'm missing two query parameters. Now that query parameter is not really coming from our route function, right? It's basically coming from where? From our dependency function. So if I refresh my server one more time, let's see, let's go back again, and go back again. I try to make this request again, then this man should tell me that I am missing two things, A and B, query parameter, right? Now this error is not actually coming from where? From our route function, because that request have not even arrived at the route function yet, right? So it's coming from where? From our dependency. Okay, that is just the key difference between a function that is passed to the depends built-in function and your normal function that you can actually invoke anywhere. Why am I feeling that I'm too fast? Is that a question? Am I too fast? It's as if I'm feeling it in my soul that I'm running too fast. Am I too fast? Is that a question? Are we? Can you guys hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Just to be sure, right? Just to be sure. Okay, Sachom, your hand is up. Osato.
Yes, sir. You are just a little bit too fast. If you can maybe repeat from the dependencies again. The the very beginning, not from the that after you made the first after you got the first message and success. When you started adding
Okay.
other things to your code, I lost you a little bit. I've been trying to catch up since then.
All right. Okay. So let's recap. Okay. Let's recap. Okay. All right. So let's go. Let's go over it again. Okay. All right. Let's go over it again. All right. Hold on. Okay. So dependency. Okay. So in its simplest form, it's basically what our Python functions or our Python classes, right? That is somehow executed before a request is what is sent to your route. Okay, so basically it follows this order. Right? So let me come up there. So if your request comes, right? Remember your request can come with optional parameter, right? Parameters, and then this request, right, is sent because of the sorry, because of the dependency, right? This request is sent directly to your dependency function, your dependency function or classes, right? And from there, the result the result from there is sent directly to your route function. Right, so that's basically how this thing goes, right? So that's basically how this thing goes. That the request is being sent. That once a request is sent, and the depend is sent directly to your dependency either function or classes, right? And then the result from that function or classes is then sent to your route function, which would then in turn, which will now in turn send this man to send out the response, right? Send out the response. So the response now comes here. Okay. So that is basically what happens, right? That is basically what happens. That when request comes, it goes to the dependency and then to the route function and then finally what's the response. Okay, and then you may want to ask what do we need this dependency, right? So to take an example, I'll a real world example. Okay, now have you been in a situation, right, where you have your account logged in at some places, right? Let's say at some website. But then if you clear your browser cache, right, you get automatically logged out of that account. And then when you try to access those logged in URLs, you are being sent back to what to the login page. So basically, if you look at that situation programmatically, right, behind the scene, what happens is that when you make a request, right, to view those login page, those secure route like your dashboard, right, what happens is that your request is sent alongside with your authentication token, like what tells the server that you are a logged in user. So as such, that page should be open to you. So, but then after you've cleared your browser cache, that token is what is also being cleared. So when you now send in your request to view those authenticated or those secured pages, what happens is that request somehow, depending on the framework, but I think that request somehow goes to the dependency, right? So the dependency checks in that request if your authentication token is still available, right? But if it's not available, it sends an error saying that let's say you are not logged in. And then in turn, the front end guy will redirect you back to where to the login page. But then if it checks and you are and that token is still available, basically what happens is that it then will proceed to the what to passing that request straight to where? Straight to the route function, and the route function can then in turn do what, fetch all the secure content for that particular route and do what, send it back to the front end guys, and then the front end guys can do what, can display it for you to do what, to see. So that is a key scenario where dependency can be used, right? But the whole point is that what is that if you bring in a dependency in FastAPI, all request goes to all request goes through them before arriving away at the route function, before you can do and finally get your response from the route function. Okay, so now I now said that that to create a dependency function is pretty simple, right? You simply do what? You simply just create your normal function, of course. You just create your normal function, and in this case here, I just created this normal function here, called dep1, right? So and then this function basically will just print and return something. There's not too much thing about that particular that's our normal function, right? But then uh, remember, I also said about that another key thing is that what makes a dependency function is that function can be seen as route function in most times. So what do I mean? That function, these functions, sorry, yeah, oh sorry, these functions, okay, can process all parameters All right. So I was saying what makes this function to be a route function, or sorry, what makes this function to be or to be seen as or to be considered as a dependency is that this function has the ability to process all parameters. That's basically what the query, the path, the header, and so on and so forth, right? And then this function must also be passed as an argument to the depends function. So when I mean depends function, I mean the one from where from fast API, that man there. So your function should be what should be passed as an argument to that function there. Okay. So those are the two things that makes your normal function to be automatically be seen as what as a dependency. If not, then it will still be seen as what as a normal function that takes into argument. So basically, what do I mean? If I should come here now and then as I say D1 equals to I just do dep1, right? And then I put parameter like that, and then I come here and execute. So let's say I come here and run this thing. Sorry, not, and I come here and I refresh my server. Let me hide this floating thing. And I come here and I refresh my server. Right, so let's refresh our server and let's execute this. Let's go back here and let's make this request. Then now you see what happens. You see what will basically happen. And so what happens here is that that request went through successfully. Now the reason or the reason for that is that this D1 here is not actually seen as a dependency. It's seen a query parameter with a default value of hello from dep1. I don't know if I'm making sense. So this D1 here, right, is seen as query parameter, right? But then if I assign a value like this, right? If I assign a value like this, let's say like hello, right? This is me doing what? Declaring that what like let this D1 have a default value of what of hello. But then if I should somehow give a new value from the client side, then this should do what override this value. So let me just print this out for view sake, right? So if I should say print D1, right? If I should say print D1, and I'll just leave it as it was as it was before. I'll come back here, excuse me, and I will invoke this man, right? I'll come back here and I will invoke this man. And then if I should make this request again, let's see. Let me refresh my server. Let me refresh my server. All right. Let me put this again. Okay, so if I send this request one more time, and then you go back to my this thing, then we get hello from dep1, right? Let's go back again to my request again, and let me go ahead and just specify a query parameter here. Say D1 equals to hi, right? And then I send this man. Then let's go back to my server again. What do you see? We see hi. All right. So that means so far what we are doing here is not really what is not really a dependency injection. So this is seen as a query parameter that has a default value from this. All right. So that means the request came straight to what to our route function. So it moved from request all the way to route function. All right. So this is not basically if we do this, then we violate the whole point of dependency, which the whole point what is to have a function process a request somewhere else before finally coming to your route function. I don't know if I'm making sense, right? So that is the whole point of dependency. So an answer that in order for your function to be considered as a dependency, that two things must be met, right? This function have the ability of processing all parameters, which in this case query and path and the rest of them. But so far, if I come here and give A and B, right? A and B would not be seen as query or path or header or body parameter. It will be seen as a normal should be provided if a one more time. So what you say? So I said it says what that this dependency one is missing a required positional argument A and B. The server did not even execute. All right. So basically it means that that the value of A and B has nothing to do with what with the parameters that come alongside with your request, right? So that is basically one of one part that your function need to what to pass, and the other part is what is that this function must be passed as what an argument to the depends function, right? So having that in mind, we have to come back here and know what and overwrite and change how this thing is what is being structured. So if I come here and I have to do what I have to bring in the depends, and then within this depends, I can do what I can pass so this one here it says that it takes any single dependable callable like function, right? Right. I say don't call it directly. Fast API will do what Fast API will call it for you. Right. So that means that when you're passing this function name, right? You don't have to do what you don't have to invoke it. Fast API will do what will automatically invoke that function for you, right? let's hopefully this thing allows me to see what we can do. Even if let's just try and see what we can do. I think network is beginning to misbehave this morning. So let's see what we can do, please. Sincere upload is about that, please. All right. Let's go. Let's continue. Okay, so Jesus Christ. All right. Like I was saying, that what makes your function to be considered as a dependency is that what this function have to have these two things, right? Must be able to process all parameters, right? And must be passed as argument to the depends function from in the depends function from the FastAPI library, as this man here, right? So basically, you invoke that function and then you do what you pass in your function that you want to be considered as a dependency, and then this man here do what will in turn invoke that function for you. Now that way when the when request comes in, the request goes straight to this function, right? And this function will in turn sorry about my background. Yeah, Jesus. All right. So and then this function will in turn will in turn um, process that request and then send back this response to your route function, and then the route function can take it from there, and then finally do what send out this return statement there. So that's basically how dependency work, or how dependency must be established. All right. So if we try this out again, I think our server is running. If you try to make this request again one more time, right? So this should throw an error, right? I think the error should be something pertaining that yes, that we are missing two query parameters, right? A and B. All right, and then if you look at what we have there, is because what we provided A and B. So A and B here can be seen as what as query parameter. But then you'll be wondering, what about other parameters? Because only query parameters, it's easier for FastAPI to do what to recognize, because any function that carries a parameter can automatically be seen as query parameter in FastAPI. So, but for other kinds of parameter, how would you use it in this case? So, for other kinds of parameters, and you intend to process it at the dependency level, what you would do is that you have to explicitly tell FastAPI that this particular parameter should be seen as what as a query or as a path parameter. So how will you do that? So remember, each parameter has their own function, right? Each parameter has their own function. So if I should come here and bring in path, right? And then I have to also bring in what annotated. So from typing, I have to bring in annotated. So import this man. Then I can then come here now and then tell FastAPI that I want A to be seen explicitly as what as a path parameter. So I simply put my type hinting, and then I'm putting my annotated, and then this man takes in the class type and whatever information you have you want to pass to that particular um, um, function there. So in this case, I can assume that my A is going to be string, and then it should be explicitly known as what seen as a path parameter, right? So now with this kind of type hinting, right? This now tells FastAPI that A should no longer be considered as query, and it should be considered as what as path. And same thing happens with any other kinds of parameter, be it body or the rest of this, be it body, form, and the rest of them, right? So each of them has their built-in function, like header as well. So you can come here now and change it to what to header, and A would be seen as what as a header parameter, and so on and so forth, right? But the key point is that this function here would be seen as a similar function as what as your route function, except that that this particular one will do what will execute first before the result from that function is being sent to your route function, right? Which can be achieved in this variable called D1, right? From the D1 now holds the result that is being sent back from what? From that dependency function. And you can do whatever you want with that result. And then at the end of it all, the final response is being sent out, right? So that is basically that about dependency. Question? Question? All right, so let's zoom this out a little bit. Let's see. I'm trying to zoom out. I see it's not coming up. All right, I think that's better. All right, question. All right, so the silence means there's no question. Okay, so but then dependency is a very sweet concept, right? It's a very sweet and interesting concept, right? And it's very simple and straightforward. So it's basically what is basically functions that will fire up before getting to what before a request gets to your route function, right? And in most times you need them, right? In most times you need them, especially when you're dealing with secured route. Of course, you need them to do what to carry out some verification or some certain tasks before what before finally getting to the route function. Okay, before finally getting to the route function, that's basically their job, right? To do certain things or to execute first or to fire up first before finally passing the result down to your route function, and you can choose to right to use it or not use it, right? So that choice is optional, right? It's strictly optional, right? Okay, so that is that about dependency. Now, one more thing you can also know again is that we can have sub dependencies, right? So sub dependencies from the name sub dependencies, you can guess what they're going what that particular and what that particular dependency is going to be for, right? So it's a dependency in which another dependency is depending on. lines, lines they cry now. So it's a dependency which another dependency relies on, right? And then your route function somehow rely on the previous dependency. So basically, it's more like a chain something. So let me show you what I mean. So assuming that our route function here called user this route function here, right, called user rec, right, and is depending on this depend one, right? But depend one can somehow depend on another dependency, right? So basically means that other dependency needs to fire up first so that dependency one can do what can use the results within itself and also fire up a next and then finally pass the result to what to your route function, which can now finally send what the final result. And this can be as many as right. You can have as many dependencies. You can have as many sub dependencies as possible, right? So it's basically up to you to make sure that whatever you are doing, right, that to make sure that you're not confusing yourself. But then you can do what you can have as many dependencies as you want, both dependencies and sub dependencies as you want. So let me just show you an example of how sub dependencies works, right? Let me show you an example of how sub dependency works. All right, so I have another dependency here called I will call this sub dep, okay, and this man will take nothing. Another man will take nothing, but here I will just print hello from sub dep, and I would basically just return the same thing as the result. All right, so I'll come here, right, and I will just return this man as it is. All right, and then come here to my to my dependency one, and then do what and make that other man make sub dependency a dependency for dependency one. Right. So please I hope that I'm not confusing what please. All right. So basically I'll call this SD as sub dependency, which should somehow remember in order to make a function a dependency, that function needs to be passed as argument to what to the depends function, right? So the depends had to come in there, and then I'll pass in what my sub dependency, and then at the end of it all, I'll pass this dependency one a dependency to this other to my route function. So basically, for my route function, sub dependency what is a sub dependency for what for dependency one, and dependency one what is the actual dependency for our route function. So that's basically how that goes. So if I should execute if I should fire up this request again, right, I should somehow see this man first before getting to this man first, and then before getting to this man last, right? So I could just simply say request. I could simply and just say something like request finally arrived at route function, right? So basically, I should see order first, right? So basically, I should see orders first, right? So let's go back and let's try this again. Right, so let's go back and let's refresh our server. All right, refresh our server. Hold on. All right, yeah, server. Okay, refresh, and then let's go back again and let's send this request one more time. Okay, so request was sent successfully, right? So let's go back and let's see our command prompt. So we have message from where from sub dependency, and then from where from dependency one, and then finally from where from the route function. So that's basically how dependencies work, right? They are basically functions that are put in place that should fire before a certain function that's their dependency to, right? Please, please, I want to confirm that we are not confused, right? Please, is there a question? Is there a question? Is there a question? All right. So the silence means no question, right? All right. All right. So let's continue. Right. Let's continue. Okay. So now that we've seen what dependency looks like, let's proceed. Let's proceed. Let's proceed. Let's proceed. Let's proceed. Hold on. All right, sir. Osato, your hand is up. Please, you can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I'm following so far, but you did not try an example using the annotated, the header or the path. I don't know if you can try and let's see how it will look like if you actually using that A and B, the different queries instead, and now and assign them to the annotated header and path. I want to just see how it will look like, please, sir.
All right. Okay. So let's do that. Okay. So let's assume that let's assume that with this sub dependency right here, right? So remember, if I should remember, because we pass these functions as argument to this depends from FastAPI, they are somehow treated as what as they are somehow treated as they are somehow treated as your route function, meaning that they can basically process all parameters like header, the header, the path, and the rest of them. So, but then I said that if we pass in like an argument like A and B, right, or let's say A alone, right, A here will be seen automatically would be seen as a query parameter, right? So if you go back again and then we try to make this request, let me just move this man up. Hold on, let me move this man somewhere. This this floating thing is not just going for some reason. Okay. All right, so let's go back and let's refresh this man. Okay, so let's refresh our server and then we have to come back here and then we have to refresh this man. Okay, and then you see that what it said that we are missing a query parameter A, right? Which is a required parameter. So that this problem here is coming from where? It's coming from our dependency, our sub-dependency here, right? Which is this man there. Now, if I go back here again, I have to come back here and do what I specify the query parameter A and then pass it a value, right? So that actually went through, but then the problem here is that is that if we actually want to collect other kinds of parameter apart from just query, how do we intend to do that? Because the thing here is that FastAPI will always assume that any parameter that you pass to your route function is seen as what as query parameter. But then any parameter that you pass to your route function, okay, but then any parameter that is also available in the URL and also passed as a route function is seen as what is seen as a path parameter. Okay, so if I want this to be path parameter, right? If I want this to be path parameter, or let's say path parameter, I'll come here and I'll just say path underscore param, okay, right? And then I try to make that function. I try to make that request again, right? So this will be seen as this will still be seen as a query parameter because that is how fast API view these things. So in this situation, how would we solve this problem? Right. So to solve this problem, we can somehow come here and use annotated, right? And explicitly tell fast API, please do not see this man as query. Instead, see it as path or header and rest of those things, right? So if I come here now, I could just say I can type hint and then use my annotated, right? And then here I can say I'm expecting that this man should be a string, assuming, and should be a string, and of course should be explicitly what a path parameter, right? So that makes it what that makes that man what to be seen explicitly as what as a path parameter. So if I should go back again and refresh my server and try to make this request again, then this error should not be telling us that we are missing a path parameter, right? I'm missing a path parameter called path parent, right? So how do we solve this, right? How do we solve this? So we have to somehow, right? Somehow make this path parent to be available. Remember, path parameter have to be path parameters are parameters that are joined in the URL, right? So that means this is the URL, right? That fires this that dependency up there, right? So that means we're going to come here and somehow make availability of this man called path parent, which is used here, right, at some point, right? Which is assumed to be used there, right? So if I should come here again and try to sorry, if I try to make that request one more time, and then let's just say just pass in some random things there, right? Send this man, right? So it tells us, let's see what is happening. Hold on. So it tells us that path params is that URL is not found. That URL is not found. Hold on. Let's debug that. Please hold on. Let's see what is happening. Let's see what is happening. Let's see what is happening. So path params, we should in turn be referenced by the sub dependency. But then we are having that URL does not exist. Have we done anything wrong? Let's see. Hold on. Oh my God. For some reasons, I have to switch my network again to another network provider. Hopefully, this one stays. Okay, so let's go back and let's continue. Hopefully, maybe after the dependency, we could just leave it for today's class, so we don't end up dragging and going on and up, on and up, on and up. So it's bad. Okay, so let's go back again to our source code. All right, all right, so like I was saying, if you provide your dependency, right, automatically can also be treated as what as your route function, right? So it means that that this man can take in parameters and process them, and we all know that what that by default, if you pass in any parameter to your function, it automatically sees as what as a query parameter. But in a situation where you want to test or where you want to collect other kinds of parameter, let's say like path parameter, header, and the rest of them, that you explicitly need to let FastAPI know that okay, that this particular parameter shouldn't be seen as query, it should be seen as path and the rest of them. Okay, so basically we did this, right? We did this because by default path parameter is also seen as the same parameter that appears in the URL like this, right? So if two of them have the same name, then it will automatically see it as what as path parameter, right? Every other kind of parameter we have to explicitly we have to explicitly do what specify it. Okay, we have to explicitly specify it, right? So what we did here, we have a parameter there that we want to do what that we want to collect as a path parameter and not as a query. So what do we have to do? We have to make sure that what we have that we have in the path the parameter that should fit in and that should fit in for that particular path parameter that we provided in the dependency there. Okay, so that means that if I should go back again to my browser, remember I have to come here and refresh my server and then go back again to my browser and then make that request. And that request should now somehow go through. So if I should send this request again, and that request actually went through. So this other last part of this URL can now be considered as what as the path parameter that is being collected by that dependency up there. Okay, so if you want to print that out, then you can simply just come here and print this out. Okay, you can simply come here and print this out. So if I say print path param, all right, so we should be able to see what we've just provided in the URL. Okay. So basically everything still remain the same, right? Everything still remain the same, except that this time around things is being processed in the call it, well, you can choose to call it in the secondary route functions, right? So you can choose to call those dependencies as secondary route functions, right? But then that is basically how they still process things as though they were your route function. But then the difference is that that processing, right, happens outside of your route function, and then the result is somehow can still be sent to the route function if need be. Right. So if you intend to still use that result, of course you can do send it back to the route function and so on and so forth. I don't know if I've been able to answer that question to understand it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. Right, so please just keep that in mind, right? So all dependencies can still be treated as what as route function, or is treated as route function, right? All dependencies is treated. So the same way you would process a path query and form and body parameter in the route function, it's exactly the same way you would do it in the route function. In the dependency function. So I still think that this should also work without you even doing this, right? So I think this should still work. Remember, we said that any parameter, right? Any parameter that matches the same parameter that we have in the path, right, is automatically considered as path parameter. But that's what we said. So I think this should still work. So if I should just let's just try this out, right? I'm not too sure, but let's just try it out. Personally, I think this should work because it looks programmatically correct. If you ask me, though, it looks because this name repeats here, right? So it should be seen automatically as path. We don't even need to explicitly put that path. So if I should go back again and let's refresh this. So let's see if this works. So let's put in new something new in that part there. So I'll say new and then go and click on enter. Let's see. Let's go back again. Let's see if we've printed that man out. Right, so you see that actually works, right? So that actually works. So this printing here was from where? Was from the sub dependency, and then finally the dependency, and then finally what the route function. So that works, right? That works. So that is one thing that you should keep in mind, right? So the same way your route function would treat all parameters, the same way your dependencies what would treat those parameters as well, right? So you have nothing to worry about. They are very interesting, right? They are very interesting concepts, and it's very, very useful. It's very, very useful. Okay. So one more thing before we proceed. One more thing. So far, all the dependencies that we've done here is basically dependency that is done in the that that is done in the path parameter, in the route function. So basically, it means that if I should create another route here, say I come here and I create another route, I'll just copy this man and edit. All right. So I don't know why I find it easy to edit than just starting afresh. So I'll say here, I will say sub two number. So this man here will take nothing, right? As if this man here takes nothing, right? And this man here takes no dependency, right? And this man here says nothing. And here I will just say success, right? Right. So here I'll just say success, right? So basically, what I mean that so far all dependencies that we've done is in the route function. It means that this dependency is only available for this particular route there. This route has nothing to do with that particular dependency. So if I should navigate to that route, then I should then nothing should happen, right? Our dependency should not fire up, because we did not this floating thing is still blocking me, because we not actually specify that what that hold on, that we not actually specify that dependency should cut across all routes, right? So we only specify it for one particular route. So if I should go to the forward slash sub two numbers forward slash sub two numbers. So I should have my success message. So but then if I should go to my command prompt, then nothing should show, right? Right, nothing should show. So that basically means that all dependence or that dependencies that we will be doing so far is route specific. It's route specific, right? But then you may want to do what you may want to pass a dependency to to go across all your routes, right? To go across all your routes. So it will be insane, or it will be not I won't say insane. It will be complicated or more complex to copy this man and be putting it in all the routes one after the other. Assuming you have about 1,000 routes in your project. So imagine copying that man 1,000 places, right? So it's pretty difficult, right? It's difficult. So one how you could do that, it's simple, right? How you could do that is simple, is that if you go back to your instance of your fast API, right? You can see that this fast API takes in a lot of things, right? It takes in so many things, right? There are some parameters that your fast API can accept, and if you look carefully, you would see dependencies as plural. Dependencies. Where is it? So there's dependencies here. So here you go see dependencies, and it takes in a list of depends, right? So basically, you can do what you can pass your dependency to your fast API, and to cut it and to put it across all your routes, right? All your routes. That way, you don't even have to do what to copy it and placing it in each route one after the other. Now, this type of dependency is what we consider as a global dependency, right? So basically, it invokes that function across all your routes. So simply come here and type in dependencies, and this man takes these dependencies as a list, right? It takes them as a list, and then it just takes a list of all depends, right? Of depends. So basically, this man can take in more than one dependency at a time. So at this point, I'll provide dep one as our dependency, and because we are passing it up there, our dep one have to be somehow be available before the instance of our route, right? So we'll cut that man up there and then bring it down there and paste it there. Okay. So that way, this dependency here will do what we'll cut across these two routes. Okay, so if I should go back again and if I should go back again, let's say, cut this man. Try go back again and try sending this request again. This one here should throw an error saying that, well, yeah, we are missing path parameter. Now the reason for that is because what is because there's a dependency that says that we must collect path parameter. So let me take off that dependency and then just come back and try this again. All right, so I'll take this man out and I'll take this man out and I'll take this man out. All right, so let's go back again and let's refresh. All right, go back. Let's just go back here and let's send this request one more time. Right, so it says message successful, and then if you go to our terminal, our dependencies was fired up. So it says hello from sub dependency and hello from dependency one, and then if you go to add two number again, so this should now fire up again those dependencies again for add two numbers. So if I should now starting time for some reason, I don't know why. So I shall go back again to my this thing. This should so now we now have our hello from sub dependency and then hello from dependency one, and then finally a request from what a request finally arrived at route function. So this one here is specific to what to that particular route. Okay, so that's basically how global dependencies work, right? So you can place them in the FastAPI instance and it will be placed across all your routes in that project, right? It will be placed across all your routes in that particular project. Are we together? Are we together? All right. So the silence means that we are together and there is no question. Normally, usually I would tell let us go continue with security, but then you get as you want to start security. Now this guy will just come misbehave. I don't trust this network. All right, so that's basically about dependencies. That's about dependencies. Okay, so one more concept again is that there are some dependencies that is created with a yield keyword. A yield keyword. So let me see how I can explain that. Which because we will likely see it, right? Now remember that our function, that our dependency, most of them are what are functions, right? Most of them are functions, right? Most of them are functions. So the thing is that there are situations or there are certain kinds of dependencies or there are certain kinds of functions that we can create that that doesn't use return statement. I'll tell you why. Let me see if I can demonstrate that. Let me see if I can demonstrate that with see if I can demonstrate that with Python, with normal Python. So I'll come here and let me just scroll this man up. All right. So remember, our dependencies are what are mostly function, right? Most of them are function. Most of them are what? Most of them are classes, right? So if I say I have a function of let's say greetings, right? Greetings, and this function takes nothing, right? And then I could print some certain things in this function, right? And I can print like hello one, and then at the end of it all, I could say return. I could say return hello one, right? So that works. That works, right? But then if I should now come here and say print, not print rather, I will say greeting. Let's invoke that function. All right, so let me just comment and things out so this thing doesn't come out. All right, so let's clean that on. All right. So now if I execute this man, right, basically what happens is our normal Python invocation, right? We have our hello one day being our print statement here, and the return statement here is basically if I should assign this to a variable, let's say a equals to this man, and I can somehow come here and say print a, right? I can say print A, and this should give us, and this should give me this should give me two hello one, right? Where one is what is the print statement from that function, right? And this other one is what, this other one is the result from the function, which is what this return hello one. All right, please, I want us to pay attention closely to this particular concept. Unfortunately, we not cover this concept when we're talking about function. All right, so now there are, we, we are aware about that return is a keyword that lives inside a function, right? Like it's a special keyword that lives inside a function that basically tells Python that this is the end of this function. Remember, the return statement marks the end of a function, right? The return statement marks the end of a function. So basically, it means that anything else that follows after a return statement, like let's say come here, I say print let's say hello two, would not do what, would not actually work, right? Because we have a return statement above that particular instruction. So the return statement is a keyword that serves two purposes in a function, right? The first purpose is what is to determine the value that what that's going out of that function, right? And the second one is what is to mark the end of that function. So those are the two things that the return keyword do in your function. So the first one mark is what is to determine the value that leaves that function, and the second one is what is to mark the end of that function. All right, which is fantastic, right? Which is fantastic. But then there are situations, right? There are situations where we want to return a value from a function, but we don't want that function or we don't want that value to be the end of that function. I don't know if I'm making sense. Let's communicate. Let's communicate, right? So maybe after this particular concept, we
Yes, sir.
can
Yes, sir.
we can wrap it up, okay? Probably after this particular concept, and then maybe in the next class, by the special grace of grace, we can cover security and look at other interesting concepts as well, right? Look at other interesting concepts as well. Okay. So like I was saying, there are situations where we want a value to be returned from a function, but then shouldn't necessarily be the end of that function, right? Shouldn't necessarily be the end of that function. this is it's one of the reasons why online courses is always frustrating in this country. All right, so please, I believe you guys can hear me. This one that my mic is not showing. That's what I'm talking. Please, I believe you guys can hear me, please.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's continue. Let's continue. All right, so I was saying that the normal function that we know what uses what the return statement within it, and that return statement does what does two things. First of all, it determines the value that will leave that function, which in this case, this is the value that will leave that function, and also determines the end of that function. So because there's a return here, it means that every other thing that follows after that return is what is automatically ignored. Right? That is the default function behavior that we all know, the one that we did in our during our Python basics, right? But then there is another kind of function that we can use, which there is need for me to bring it in here because we are going to somehow use it in FastAPI. Now this function is called a generator function. Let me put it up there. Generator function, right? And there is no special thing about it, right? It just is still what is still a function, right? It's still a function, but the difference is that this function does not use the return keyword, but instead this function uses what a yield keyword. This keyword called yield, right? This keyword called. So that means where there is return, you just simply switch it to what to yield, right? And what's the difference between yield and what and return? So yield also serve as two purposes, for two purposes. I mean, so the first purpose is what is to determine the value that will leave the function, and the other purpose is what is to pause the function, right? So you can say that there's a difference between return and yield. So the return does what stop the function. The yield, where the yield do what pauses the function. So it means that the function is very much active, but at this point, that is where it is stopping, right? But then when you need the remaining part of the function, you can know what you can simply invoke it again, and it will continue from where it stopped. See, that's the beautiful thing about yield. It knows where it stopped, right? So it knows how, that it should continue from here. So it will not go and continue from the top, right? Or for the beginning of that function, it will simply do what? It will simply continue from where it stopped, right? So let's come back and let's change our return here to what? To yield. So if I come here now, right? If I come here now and then change my return here to yield, right? Now you can see that our print down here becomes active. So that fence appearance now becomes bright, right? So it means that this function can still proceed to what? To show the rest of the code even after the first yield, right? That is the beauty of yield. So because of that yield in that function is not seen as what as a generator function. It means that it will do what? It will execute everything from beginning to the end in phases, or should I say in pauses. So where it meets the first yield, it will stop there. And then when you invoke again, it continues till where it sees the next yield, and then it stops again. And then if you invoke again, it goes again to what? Till the last yield. And then it will keep going to what? Till it gets to the end of that function. That's basically how this kind of function works, right? So if we invoke this function as it is, right, and we try to print A, right? Let's see what we have as A. So we have the location of where that function is. So basically, we don't really have the content of the function, right? We don't really have the content of that function, but instead we have where it's being stored. This thing that you're seeing here is what is location. Is memory location in your device, right? So it says that this function called greeting, which is now seen as a generator object or a generator function, is available at this point, right? Now, why is it showing like that? Is because this man is not returning any value yet, right? So it will only return value when you kind of call. There is a special function that Python has in place for this kind of function that invoke them and then take it away to the first yield and then process it and then keep going and so on and so forth. So that's basically how this man works. Okay, so now how do we get the first part of this function up to where? Up to yield, right? So let's come back here. So if I should come here again So the function is what is called the next function. It's a built-in next function. So if I simply just say print, so instead of printing a, right, I will use that next function. So instead of printing a, I'll use what the next function, right? So it's a built-in function that basically executes a generator object. So this next function will do what we'll now take in our a, right? So our a here is what is the man that holds the memory or the location of that function, right? So this next will do what? This next will do what? We'll simply fire up that function and we'll execute it up to where we have yield. But that doesn't mean that that the function has ended. It's still active. So if I should call again, that next again, it knows where it stopped. So what happened? It will go again and do what and continue from there again, right? So if I come here and then do something like this. So if I execute now, I should have hello and then hello one. So this hello here is what is the print, and then the hello one is where is the yield. That is the result that was received from that function. So that's the first result, right? So that function executed, and the final result was what was hello one, right? But it stops there. But it doesn't mean that function has finished, right? If I go back again and say and print again, right? I should now have the remaining part. That is hello 2, and somehow do what get my yield result. So if here I could say ending or end or end. So that means that is like the end of that particular function, or there's nothing more again after that particular yield. So if I should run this now, this should now move them one by one, right? So we move to this point, and then we move again to this point. That is basically how generator functions work, right? And it's very useful in some cases, especially in the case of FastAPI. So basically, what do I mean? I mean that most times your dependencies, which we'll talk about in our next class, your dependencies can have yield, right? So that when you see me use yield in one of our dependency in our next class, you know where I'm what I'm actually using it. So where we will likely use this man is when we want to interact with database, right? Interacting with database. Now, why do we need yield in this kind of situation? So the thing is that when interacting with database, right, there's what we call session, right? So see session as a platform for communication, right? Just assume or just see it as a platform for communicating with database. So this man has to open, right? So see it as a book, as a file. Remember when handling file, when we're talking about file in our previous class, we said about that every file once open has to be closed. If not, if it stays open for a long time, some things may start missing. So see session as a file or as a medium of interacting with database, and this man has to be open, and then after this has to be closed, right? So now how does function with yield works here? So the function with yield works here in a sense that I'll have a function where the first part of that function is to open up that session, but then I don't want to close that function yet till I have finished interacting, right? So that means my interaction will stay in between here, right? My interaction will stay here, right? And then once I'm done, I can do what? I can simply go back again to that function and then continue from where I opened this from, right? And then do what? Close that function. Am I making sense? Am I making sense?
Yes, sir.
Right. So, but don't worry. Once we get to that class, you will see how this will do. I think database is interacting with database. I think that should be in our next week classes, right? In our next week class. But just have it in mind about that there are functions that can involve yield. So even if you see it outside of FastAPI, just know that this kind of function is a function that does not end after the first returning, like after the first result has been returned, right? Just know that these are generators function. That means that they don't end. They will execute till the very last code. So even if there's still a code after here, right? Like let's say I say come here and say print hi, right? If I should if I should if I should if I should call this next function again, right? The hi should do what will execute, right? Because that is how this function behaves. So it will execute and stop at wherever it says yield, and then execute again and stop at wherever it says yield, and then execute it again. So because because there is no code after this last part, so that is the only part that will execute, right? That is the only part that will execute. So that is basically how this kind of function behave. But then the key thing is that we won't be doing this in Fast API, right? Fast API will do this for us automatically. So once we pass this kind of function as dependency, Fast API knows how to handle it, like how to handle generator function. So how will it handle it? Once the request comes in, it invokes that function, right? So it will invoke that function. Once a request comes in, it invokes that function and stop at the first yield. Once the response is sent out, it goes back and invoke the function again and continue to the last of that function. So you don't even have to actually worry about much, right? You don't have to actually worry yourself much about how that will happen. Fast API was handle that automatically. Just pass the function as dependency. It knows that it should go back and close that function or go back and execute the remaining part of that function once the response has been sent out. Right. So that happens automatically. We don't even have to do what to close to call the next function. Right. Fast API calls that next function behind the scene. Very, very fantastic framework. Very fantastic framework. All right. So question on dependency. So that because of time and network, we can't really we can't really look at security. Okay, so I said that the two main points of the yield function, right, is that of course the yield determined um, 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 the value that will leave that function. Remember, by default, your function is meant to process and die, like everything is meant to process and die within your function. Without the return or yield, nothing will leave that function, right? So both the return and the yield determine what leaves a function, right? But then the yield, on the other hand, also determines where this function should pause, right? So it determines the pause and continuation of this function, right? So at this point, yield there, that signifies what? That function will execute and will pause there. And that place there will also signify what? The resumption of that function. So that's basically what yield is used for. All right. And once yield is used in a function, that function is called a generator function, right? So basically, generator functions are what are functions that uses yield and not return. And because the yield, and because their values are yield or they are using yield, they do not end, right? They do not end at first invocation. They still continues up to the very last code within that function. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so please, our tax is coming in this week. So we have like one more tax left, which is after like next week, because next week, remember, it is now 1 week in, 1 week out. So that previous time that we started out, that we're basically doing tax almost every week. It was to make sure that everything that we are teaching you sinking, right? So now that it has sink in, right? We now give you, because we are assuming that as we are going forward, things are becoming complicated. That's basically our assumption, right? As you are moving forward, more complex things is coming in. So as such, we have to give you room to sink it in, right? We have to give you room to sink it in. So tax will come in at this juncture, I know for one, I want to, I want to. So at this juncture, I don't want to go far again because I feel one go explain again. Many networks will come up again. All right, so this is where we will end. Uh, this is where you we will end, and we'll see you guys on Thursday, right? So if you look at our curriculum, I think we've basically gone far. Let me see if I can share my screen. We have like few concepts left. Hopefully we can wrap that other entire concept, and hopefully we can still have like maybe two more classes free that we can maybe do some practicals and stuff like that. Yeah, that's the whole point, right? But let me just end this course. There's no point of recording this particular part, right? So